You literally think monarchy is something that it wasn't. You're wrong. You're just wrong. It was decentralized. Like the whole reason why the serf system had to exist was because that's how they had to maintain that power. They weren't there because they were proud to be English serfs, and the serfs didn't give a they literally lived in poop huts, bro.
This is the U.S. intelligence agency, mind control.
Ethno-nationalist? Is that enough? Do you want more specific? I mean, it's pretty easy to define a Nazi.
Yeah.
Just don't be a cunt. It's pretty simple.
And this is coming from a guy who's a fascist.
What about the very occasional appearance of Nazis in Melbourne? Yeah, great.
Oh, come on. There's like 6 of them.
And they typically buy
I know, there's only like 6
each
of them,
year.
but they're out there a lot. Do you want to tell us what fascism is?
Me or them?
Yeah, you.
Oh.
Come on, we're live. Go.
You know, I mean,
We'll do it live.
I'm babysitting a chinchilla.
A chinchilla?
And it depends on your definition of it, right? So, like, the most purest base of fascism is obviously Mussoliniism, but that's like saying that, like, if you say like Marxism, you know, like, what does that even mean nowadays? So when you say a Marxist, it's not even because we're talking Marx being written at the time of Abraham Lincoln, you know, like they were friends, right? Like it's a lot different of an ideology has evolved, just like how liberalism comes out of like the Leviathan and common law. I really need to get this chinchilla though. Okay, anyway, so for example, a Democrat can't be fascist by definition. How is that? What definition? Fascists can support democracy. Modi is a democratically elected fascist. Erdogan is a democratically elected fascist. You could even say Orban is a democratically elected fascist. Fascism can totally exist in liberal frameworks. Hang on, I need to open a paint program at this point.
Okay.
I'm making a diagram.
Never said that it couldn't.
I'm making
a dictator is a different word. Fascist does not necessarily mean dictator, but it often is, because it necessitates a central power. Just like communism. Communism is like, there's no power involved, but there's always a dictator because they have to go through authoritarian socialism.
Widespread popularity, especially on TikTok. She's been featured in songs with Taylor Swift. She's been on the Barbie movie soundtrack. So she is, by every quantifiable measure, a bona fide musical
Okay,
superstar.
I finished my simple diagram to explain it. All right, based off of Hegelian dialectics. All right. So you have 3 structures of power and how power of relationships happen. Now, this is not made up of an entire system, but like the Hegelian dialectic, it's a multiple branches of a dialectical system. And so you address this with every relationship that you have on how the power trends, right? So nobody is going to be, it doesn't matter if you claim to be a communist and you'd say that you're like bottom up, right? Because it's like power to the people. That's like totally what communism is. You can claim that all you want. You can claim to be a communist all you want. But when you do dialectical analysis, how many times does it suddenly become horizontal? So how many times does it become top down, right? So these are all relationships that you have, even relationships to the economy, relationships to earth, relationships to the nature, all this stuff. So when we're talking about fascism, all we're talking about is someone who trends top down. That's all it is at the end of the day. So as far as like putting stuff, that's the issue with a left right. That's why you need a triangle, right? So I was watching Hassan earlier and I was like, bro, what is he talking about? It's actually on here where this spawned this idea in my head. But he's talking about liberal Zionism, saying like, what you have to understand is that they're still right wing as a liberal Zionist in the frame. And it's like, bro, no, they're not. They're literally not, right? They all they want, a liberal Zionist is somebody who wants a Palestinian state, or that can be integrated, 1 state, 2 state, doesn't matter. They're just anti-apartheid people who don't want to be deported from their own country. Like that's and like he's like, they're not communist, and it's like, bro, who the fuck cares if they're communist or not? Like, what is their relationship to power? And how do they see power? Who the fuck cares about fucking communism or anything like that? As far as I care, as long as something is like being trending towards top down, you're taking power away from the people. If things trends towards a horizontal or bottom up, you're adding power to the people. So I really don't care about what anyone is as long as it's trending away from top down authority.
Yeah.
What
Fuck
about
monarchy. Monarchy can
Bro,
die.
what
Behead all
about
kings.
monarchy? It existed way before fascism. No shit. Monarchy also ended before the fascist thing. But fascism has its roots in ending monarchy. It's literally from romantic nationalism. It has its roots in the French Revolution and the American Revolution, even. And you'll hear commies say this bullshit all the time about how Hitler got the idea from America. Shut the fuck up. That's not what I'm talking about. It's romanticism. They literally, it's the invention of the idea that it's attaching to an offshoot of liberalism, where they start idolizing and making figureheads out of things, where they are building, like Robespierre built statues to himself. He became a god, right? It was a romantic nationalist attitude. And those ideas evolved from the French Revolution to go in two different directions. One of those being more of a communist Marxist influence, and the other one being more of a syndicalist fascist type of influence. And that's not like saying that syndicalists are fascists. It's just that's what Mussolini was. Is he started as a syndicalist. He saw the romantic side of nationalism, and he became a fascist. He invented fascism. That's all it is at the end of the day. A simple definition of fascism is just romantic nationalism. All it is.
Yeah, we are defining it for you to show you that we are labeling it correctly. Autocrat is very specific to a power structure. Fascist
And
is an
also,
idea.
you
It's an
can be an
ideology.
autocratic fascist just like you can be a
Yes.
democratic fascist.
Yes,
Like,
exactly.
like Putin has like literally has fascists in his coalition. There's people who are more fascist than him. Navalny is more fascist than him, but at the end of the day, he still falls into that fascist spectrum. He backs fascist groups. He has an interest in making sure fascist power structures grow. You also, like with India, like there's nothing saying that India is not like democratically electing Modi. He's literally just a populist, right? He's there because he's a populist. He's not an autocrat. I mean, you could say he's tyrannical in many ways. He's not good to minorities, things like that. But that's happened in plenty of democracies as well. It's not, fascism is not just a simple style of government. Just how communism, they say that it's a specific thing. They say that it's a specific goal and an ideology and all this thing. But at the end of the day, it's not. It's just a specific trend towards how solutions are solved at the end of the day. That's all these terms mean. It doesn't matter what these terms mean at the end of the day as well. Like communism can mean anything. Fascism can mean anything to most people, right? But at the end of the day, when you're looking at fascism, you're looking at romantic nationalism. Anything that can be defined in a fascist framework is going to be romantic nationalist. That said, there's communists who are romantic nationalist as well. They would be fascist. You can be both.
Yes.
It's like it's not exclusive. You can be a liberal fascist. Like because it's not like this says liberal down here where it says horizontal. It's not, it doesn't say anarchist, it says horizontal, right? So it, as long as you're ending up with more dots in this top corner, you're going to trend towards romantic nationalism and fascism. You can also be an autocrat. Like here's a good example is Turkmenistan. Is that guy a fascist? Well, I don't know if there's a real racial component around his tyranny, right? He definitely is like tyrannical, like he controls the state like Kim Jong-un does.
Yeah, for sure.
Is Kim Jong-un a fascist? Well, there's no real racial component around it. He certainly isn't letting people into the country. Is it anti-immigration? Does that make him a fascist? No, he's an autocrat.
Yeah, he would by definition be an autocrat, yeah. And then China, I always say, is fascist.
Well, Xi is fascist.
Yeah,
Which
like
goes to show
China
you that,
under him is fascist, yes.
but like
So
even the
Xi's
guy
China
who's
is
running people
fascist.
over with tanks, we wouldn't call a fascist.
No. So it does change, and you can be both. Like this is not a simple topic. So, and like people see my Twitter and be like, "You only call people fascists because I only interact with fascists." Because like I'm
So this is another
literally
thing with
tracking
Daesh,
them.
right? So like nobody referred to al-Qaeda as fascist.
Yeah.
They started becoming fascist when it came to the Iraq War because it had to do with the Shia complex there, right? And everyone refers to Daesh as a fascist group, but not al-Qaeda, when they're basically the same thing. They're not that far off. Nobody's calling the Taliban fascist.
Although at this point, I'm not sure you would.
What about Iran, though?
Iran, I'm not sure. Theocratic fascism, maybe. And that's what this
Like
guy
Matt
is. That's
Walsh.
what Matt Walsh is.
Oh, good
Yeah.
transition back to the thing.
I'm
Yeah,
shocked. He
no,
doesn't
so
like
like
Ice
this
Spice
this
or
is
the
spot on right here, right? So like part of the whole reason why romanticization was invented was because after the French Revolution, there was no it was like everything was a city identity. Right? Nobody really saw themselves as the French. So the idea was to make them into the French. Right? So like France as a state didn't exist until fascism had its roots there with romantic nationalism. Like fascism is purely responsible for nation states. The fascist ideas trended to create those nation states.
Yeah, well, it's important because this guy is a fuckwit and a fascist and should be fucking called out
Oh,
for
you know
it.
what? I was
Nobody
thinking of
should
this
be
video
watching
on
him.
nationalism.
Ah, okay.
Germany at the time was far from being the European power that we know now. The German people were scattered,
Audio way
downtrodden,
jack, bro.
and economically behind. It was far from clear that there even was such a thing as a German state or a German nation. If anywhere, it seemed to be embodied most in the Holy Roman Empire. But that was a decentralized, unusually weak authority. A high-ranking imperial official put it this way in 1766. He asks, "What are the Germans?" And he answers himself, "We have been for centuries
What are the
puzzle of a
Germans?
political constitution, a prey of our neighbors, an object of their scorn, outstanding in the history of the world,
We are
disunited
Aryans?
among ourselves, weak from our divisions, strong enough to harm ourselves,
Even though that's the
powerless to save
Iranians?
ourselves, inconsistent about principles, coercive about enforcing them, a great but also a despised people, a potentially happy but actually a very lamentable people." In the late 18th century, Germans found a way to cope with that lack of national strength and unity by essentially getting in touch with Germany. They traveled the countryside in search of Germany's
They touched their
metaphorical
fatherland.
interior. They looked for Germany's rhythm in bards and folk songs. They tried to capture the sensual power of its landscapes through poetry. They also philosophized about the German language, calling attention to its unique character, but then going even further, claiming that words aren't just things that describe the world, but allow you to feel the world from the inside. That way of thinking found its clearest expression in the Sturm und Drang movement, the Storm and Stress movement. But it wasn't nationalism yet. It was Germans creating a romanticized sense of country, or a romanticized sense of nationality. It was making Germany into something subjective, something interior. It was creating a deeper relationship between subject and object, a person and place. It was something that would allow Germans to say, eventually, this is who I am. That feeling crystallized into nationalism for the first time after the French Revolution, specifically after the French invaded German lands.
Bro, do you think I'm literally retarded that I forget that monarchy exists? Like we even talk about Saudi Arabia. Like you don't even know what the fuck you're talking about. You're literally saying this is what you think. You're wrong. You have no clue what the fuck I'm talking about. I'm literally showing you how under a king, like this is literally, you asked for the source. So I'm sitting here showing you a guy breaking down how the king, literally, he said how under the fucking monarchy, they still weren't seen as German. It was a decentralized thing under a fucking emperor, under the Holy Roman Empire. These empires were decentralized. Like you're literally, your brain is rotted from romanticism. You literally think monarchy is something that it wasn't. You're wrong. Like you're just wrong. It was decentralized as fuck. Like the whole reason why the serf system had to exist was because that's how they had to maintain that power. Like they weren't there because they were proud to be fucking English serfs and shit. The serfs didn't give a fuck. They literally lived in poop huts, bro. You think they actually gave a fuck who governed them? That like, it doesn't mean they had freedom either. Like, come on.
Clearest proponent was a man named Ernst Moritz Arndt. Arndt explicitly called for the unification of Germans into a nation. In doing that, Arndt...
You see what I mean when I say that romantic nationalism is the source of fascism, and it also gave us the concept of nation states, so therefore fascism can be in the foundation of states themselves.
Yes.
You understand why this concept exists and why I'm saying this? Because it's literally in the roots of what became Nazi Germany. There is no Nazi Germany without this period of creating a German identity. There was no German identity before this. It didn't exist. A French identity didn't exist. This whole patriot thing, patriot didn't mean American. The Americans after the revolution still considered themselves British ethnically. There was no concept of a nation state even though America is thought to be the thing that invented the nation state. When they didn't. They invented a confederacy that they stole from the people who were already living here, who already were governing in confederacies, And then they lied and said they got it from the Romans because they romanticized it. And this was even before the romantic thought was even taking place, right? Because Romanticism has its roots in liberalism, and it can go back even further there. And then where does liberalism further come out of? It becomes when they actually sign the Magna Carta, right? Because people end up having enough wealth from the merchant class that they start to say, we want more actual freedom exercised, because it wasn't a problem exercising like any type of monarchy or monetary freedom under the monarchy until it got to the point where the merchants were actually having more power than the kings. Then they started cracking down on people because it became a threat to the king's power. As long as something wasn't a threat to the king's power, they really didn't give a shit what was going on in their fucking land that they controlled thousands and thousands of miles away that they would never see in their life. They just tax it. That's all it is. As long as they paid that tax, people could basically do whatever the fuck they want, even though that's not exactly true. It's not like it was a utopia and people were free.
Yeah. But
Articulated
that's
a
also
key
what
feature of
borders, right? The whole idea of getting rid of borders breaks nationalism too. You can't be proud about something that doesn't exist. So you break those borders, you break those stupid little lines on a map, and you kill fascism. It's no longer there. You just sort of forget about it and just becomes a thing. Just like people forgot before the nation state existed. You know, it's just
More
the normal
centralized
thing
in
now.
other places, such as the Byzantine Empire. Yeah, bro. Sure. The Byzantine Empire. That was definitely, like, when I think of like places that had no merchant fucking wealth and didn't have a merchant society that could totally act independently with their wealth and power, definitely not Byzantine, a fucking trade hub.
Like nationalism, which is that it leans into a sentiment that's felt, or it could be felt, by its nationals. That's often a sentiment that flies in the face of the so-called civilized world. The sentiment that Arndt leaned into was the shared hatred of the French. It was a sentiment held personally by Arndt, as he recalled upon seeing the French occupy the Rhineland. Here I learned to hate them, as enemies and destroyers of my people, and hardly do I see one more, and my cheeks flush hot with blood.
Whoa.
He then tapped into that hatred as a means of arousing and unifying Germany. For example,
Oh,
in
look,
this
hatred
poem,
forming
what is the
German identity. I wonder why.
Now that's just
Fascism
this is
formed.
just an example of Germany, right? And then it's talking about nationalism mixes, okay?
nationalism were things that tended to emerge.
So we understand
Oh
the
my
idea
God.
of romanticism, okay? So now it mixes with nationalism.
Perspective back out. Nationalism, again, was a European invention.
Uh-huh.
There were
Wow, crazy.
nationalities and things that resembled nations, but the concrete conception of nations and
95% of
nationalism
all
were
awful
things that
ideas have
tended
come
to
out of Europe.
emerge around the world upon contact with Europe. First in Latin America and around the rest of Europe, and then in Asia and Africa from the 20th century on. The inspiration.
Whoa, crazy. You mean states and countries didn't exist until the 20th century, and our concept of like history is totally flawed because we're still thinking about borders and nation states when we think about something like Byzantine Empire?
Taken from the West.
Like the monarchy in Saudi Arabia is like has more control over people than other monarchies did in history. Like it's not like you know, there was way more tyrannical monarchies, don't get me wrong, but like the fact that Saudi Arabia runs itself the way it does, like most monarchies did not have that type of control over the people.
Yeah. Technology
Like-
has changed the game.
Was often a conscious one.
Nationalism changed the game.
Yeah.
Monarchs didn't have that type of power before. If monarchs had the power of nationalism and romanticism, it'd be difficult to say if monarchy would have ended at the time it did.
Many societies around the world effectively realized that they had the Poland problem. They were disorganized and internally divided. And to fix that,
Yeah, but literally what's funny is when I said not like all monarchs, I was literally thinking Vlad the Impaler in my head when I was saying that. So yeah, 100%. That's like Vlad the Impaler was definitely worse than Saudi Arabia.
to bring strength, unity, and stability to their people, they said they must, to some extent, learn from the West. Until the first half of the 19th
What was
century,
that? Now we're getting into
nationalism,
China?
inspired by the
Mhm.
French, was closely linked to liberal values. But as
Oh,
romantic
whoa, crazy. Remember when I said that?
nationalism became more popular, things began to change. Nationalisms around the world started to take on a hybrid character. The ideology of Chiang Kai-shek the leader of China before Mao
Oh,
Zedong.
crazy. Now nationalism is evolving into different thing. Remember? Because like they, Chiang Kai-shek is, kind of one of those people we could call a fascist.
Is
But
the-
somehow they developed out of fascism and into liberalism.
Yeah, pretty crazy.
But communism, it must be achieved through a bloody revolution. It totally can't evolve out of liberalism, even though it did.
example of that. Chiang called for the naming of and extermination of domestic enemies, namely
Boo!
communists. He
Boo!
called for the spiritual
Boo.
regeneration of his people for the sake of making a strong, unified, and safe China. A goal, he told Chinese, they should be ready to die for at any moment.
Both
Boo.
That
suck.
was also with the
Boo.
goal
Boo!
of eventually creating
Sounds like Xi
a
Jinping
democratic,
to me.
pluralistic
Yeah.
China. Precise labeling of that kind of ideology isn't easy, and most just
And like
settle with
that's
calling
another
Chiang
thing.
a
Is like
nationalist.
how
As
Stalin
nationalism spread,
was literally, or no, Lenin. He literally talks about like democracy. Like the real democracy is when like capital can't manipulate the people and stuff. Like they try, like Luna Oy will make these arguments of how about Lenin actually loved democracy, he just couldn't
Yeah.
achieve it because he was trying to build true democracy, right?
Sure, yeah. That's why he looked down upon people
The
and
point is that
commanded people and
he
thought that
still
they were
claimed
dumb.
to have an end goal of democracy, which Chiang Kai-shek also did. So what I'm saying is this guy is basically Lenin.
it began to appear increasingly powerful, even unstoppable. Many of those making that realization were politicians.
I'm so glad I didn't have to go through and find all these book quotes myself, and he did it for me. Right?
Who began to
I'd be like Wikipediaing all day trying to find the quotes if I
lean
had
into
to.
nationalism as part of their image and platform. That, combined with developing
If you want to learn about like how politics are framework, you definitely need to start with Leviathan and Hegel, not Karl Marx. He's like 6 books in,
technology and state apparatus made a new type of nationalism possible, and the last one we're going to talk about today. And that nationalism was fascism. Fascism, if we're trying to use the word accurately, is an extreme form of nationalism. The Italian fascisti were the first official fascists. They wanted to create a single-party fascist state.
Hi, everybody.
And then subordinate
Actual
the entire
Nazi
Italian
here.
nation to that fascist state. That would all be done in the name of establishing and heightening the greatness of the Italian nation. As Mussolini.
Wow, it's crazy. It's almost like I wasn't talking about Marx at all in that analogy. I was talking about like people who have modern day ideologies of what communism is and how they think they need to do all these revolutions and shit instead of just voting for somebody who has communist principles. It's almost like FDR literally like read Marxist theory before he like did his policies and stuff. Not saying that his policies were Marxist or based on Marx. I'm just saying that he read Karl Marx. Like, why wouldn't he have? That's all they had back then was fucking reading books.
Marx is outdated. It's that simple. It's just
Well,
an outdated.
it really is too, because the whole idea of the capitalist collapse there happened. It happened in the Great Depression, and what happened? Socialist policy was able to be implemented to counter that. And I was talking about this. Nobody was listening though, because it was on Black Red Guard's post. But he said like basically like Israel will fall eventually. It's inevitable. And I'm like, Israel is already a failed state. But because they have a monopoly on violence, they're able to maintain themselves. And that's key there, is that when a state fails, it still has its monopoly on violence to withhold the power going to the people. So the state will stay in a failed state instead of passing to the people because of the military industrial complex and the fucking militarized police.
Our myth is the nation. Our myth is the greatness of the nation. And to this myth, this greatness, which we want to translate into a total reality, we subordinate everything else. Mussolini.
And like it's so weird, like America today, how they mythologically like think of Washington. They even like say that he had wooden teeth to make it like a folk.
They mythologize it, yeah.
And it's like he didn't have no, he didn't. Like we know where his teeth came from. I literally went to Mount Vernon and they're like, here's the teeth he ripped out of slaves in war. This is what he ate. These are the slave teeth he wore when he ate turkey. These are the slave teeth he would wear when he was talking. He actually had different sets of teeth depending on what thing he was doing. Crazy.
Epic.
And then there's the whole like, oh, he chopped down a cherry tree and then told his dad because he couldn't tell a lie. Shut the fuck up. Shut the fuck up. Like, stop. Just stop. He retired. The whole thing. Oh, he was noble. He retired after his second term out of nobility. Yeah, dude. It's definitely because he wasn't making a salary and needed to fucking go make money from his fucking slave. That's definitely because he was a good person. That's why the term limit ended to become a monarch and shit. Yeah, dude.
Was somewhat inspired by Mazzini, but he rejected internationalism as a principle that could bind people together. As he put it, the unit of loyalty was too large, and he instead focused on his own country,
Boo!
which developed into a
Internationalism is way better. Boo!
passionate nationalism. As he put it to the Italian parliament in 1925, we all know that what motivates me
Good grip.
is not a personal whim. It is not lust for power. It is not an ignoble passion, but only an unlimited and burning love for the fatherland. He became especially interested in the collectivizing potential.
Calling up
of
fatherland
national
is cringe.
consciousness. He wanted a shared national consciousness to be at the center of a movement so collectivist.
What's that?
was
National
openly
collectivism?
anti-individualistic.
Whoa.
All individuals.
You mean the
were,
difference
in
between
theory,
communism and
to merge their
fascism
being
is
with the
just nationalism or internationalism? Whoa.
These principles of anti-individualism. I think that's another one that gets slept on a lot when we talk about fascism, of anti-individualism, because there's so many other components to it. But I think this is a good one to point out, is the anti-individualism, because
Yes.
the whole thing of like people thinking that like liberalism is the third option between communism and fascism, when all of them can exist simultaneously. Like liberalism is just the component of being more individualistic. You can, if you're a more individualistic fascist, you're a liberal fascist. If you're individualist Baathist, you're a liberal Nazi.
fascist state. As Mussolini put it, fascism stresses the importance of the state and accepts
No,
the
it's
individual only insofar as his interests coincide with those of the state. This is taking nationalism to
Remember
such
when
an
I said, "Oh, I'm not racist until you disagree with me," right? So this is how fascism can exist and be multiracial.
authoritarian degree that people essentially become subjects again. What the fascist state officially thinks and wants, its subjects also officially think and want. This higher personality, he said, becomes a nation. The state creates a nation. So fascists want to destroy the existing government and make a new state. Then that state creates a nation. And through that nation, the will of the people is realized.
Now it's becoming commie stuff. Now we're talking about totally destroying and revolutionary stuff.
To the nation, volition
Interesting.
is conferred.
It's almost like
and the people are
fascism
made one.
originated
It
from
makes
Marx
them,
as well.
as he said, aware of their moral unity.
Crazy.
So with fascism, the nation and
Well, it certainly came from Jacobins.
Syndicalism.
its subjects belong to the fascist state. And there's no restrictions on what the fascist state can do to that nation and to its subjects. As you might expect, that allows the fascist state to aim to entirely transform its nation and its people according to its needs, as Mussolini put it.
Crazy. All right, so that's Ryan Chapman. All right,
Good video.
Great videos on theory, if you care about theory. Now we're not going to talk about theory anymore because theory is gay, and I don't fucking care.
It is absolutely correct. Her music is indeed as hideous and mind-numbing as you imagine. This 45-second clip of her performing her latest track
like
is
the
Spotify
gayest
Best
shit
New Artist
I've
event.
ever heard.
It should be enough to prove
Theory
the
is
point.
gay.
Here it is.
I can't.
Like, who
Unfortunately,
gives a
we're gonna have to skip past this part because we'll get knocked on copyright. OD if we play that. But the lyrics are like,
say
think
later.
you're the shit. You not
Hey, did you all know
Thanks for
that
tuning in.
we have a new fundraiser going for the drone recon team in Ukraine? They need vehicle repairs. Here's a QR code that you can scan to go to the money jar that's collecting money for their vehicle repairs. This money is basically going to go directly to them. You don't have to worry about going through the government if you're scared of that for some reason, you know? And then after you're done donating there, if you have extra money, you can go to our Patreon. You can help us found our nonprofit. We're trying to raise money for our nonprofit to help journalists in countries that are at war or have limited rights on those freedoms of journalism and of the press. So we need money to start that nonprofit, to do the paperwork, things like that. And subscriptions help us save up to get to that goal.
the lyrics here, but let's keep going.
Dystopian future where average
I
IQ
love
scores
dick.
have plummeted well below
And
room temperature.
vagina.
And America
Oh, what he says is,
so-
you know,
It can't get gayer. As a non-binary who goes both ways, right? That's like default as gay as it gets, I think. I don't know.
Possible.
Theoretically, that sounds pretty gay to me.
It is
Obviously,
pretty
you love theory. You shut your mouth, okay? You
gay.
shut your mouth.
Are you aware of a CIA psychological profile about you, sir? Would you be interested in hearing what the CIA had to say? This secret study portrays as a brilliant but dangerous megalomaniac who is likely to pursue his own aims in disregard of U.S. interests. He's an uncertain ally. Shall I go on, or would you prefer that I stop, sir?